Welcome to our ongoing series of Biz Sugar Live webinars on the second and fourth Wednesdays of every month at noon Central. Today we are fortunate to have Darren, and he has 15 years of marketing experience in retail, manufacturing, and internet corporations. He has an MBA in internet marketing and has monetized small businesses online through SEO for virtually every business model. He is the co-founder of the Orbit Local Marketing Agency and runs the popular blog Ecommerce SEO. Darren is perfect for this topic because he knows that SEO is different depending on your business type and model. And he has success with local businesses, e-commerce sites, affiliate sites, and info products. So let's welcome Darren and take it away.
Hey, thanks for the intro, Gail. So yeah, not to just toot my own horn too much, but been doing SEO for a really long time. I love it. I get excited about talking about it, my content in case studies in the future on some big sites. And I'm the guy, behind the scenes putting in the work. So today we're going to talk about small business SEO basics for 2021. So today we're going to talk about how to approach SEO in 2021. Whether it's 2008 or 2032, you should always have the same approach to SEO, no matter what Google is doing. I'm also going to talk about the 5, not 2,000 ranking factors that matter the most. We're going to talk about how to optimize for the ones that are under your direct control, which is technical SEO, content strategy, and on-page SEO. We're not going to have time to talk so much about link building, schema, local SEO, GMB. Biz Sugar already has some good training around those topics, but today we're really going to focus in on technical SEO, content strategy, and on-page. Right, so let's talk about how to approach SEO. So the approach has never changed, right? The secret has and always will be understanding the SERPs, the search engine results page, and trying to figure out why Google is ranking those pages, right? And you see here today, if you look all the way down there at the very, very bottom, you see Orbit Local, below the ads, below the maps, below all of these things. And so we're going to talk about how we deal with that going forward. So just to flip back a little bit. So when I first started doing SEO, 15, 20 years ago now, I can't even keep track, but you get in this one spot here and you rank and you bank, right? And nowadays it's not like that at all. You look at the same search here and there's product ads, there's text ads, there's maps, even in this case. So there's a big rise in Google My Business is showing up for random different searches. You have knowledge boxes here. So I guess the takeaway here is that Google is now showing these like highly contextual SERPs based on what people are searching for. It's not these just 10 blue links on a page anymore. And even now it's way harder than it used to be because of all those things. And even if you do all the SEO work, you're still down here below all these things, and it's really a pay to play. So you have to kind of figure out what this all means, right? When you start looking at all these things on the SERP and how busy it is, there's been a huge increase in zero-click searches. That basically means that 1/3 or 2/3 of all Google searches don't end in a click, and that's crazy when you think about that. People are Googling stuff and they don't even have a need to click through to go to the results. And that's kind of scary, right? As I'm telling you here, like SEO, since I've started, 15, 20 years ago, it's getting harder. The clicks are going away, right? But so why even do it? But is that even true? Like, are the clicks really going away? But no, they're not. There's actually more and more people searching on Google every year. And so even though there's a huge percentage of clicks or searches that don't end in a click, there's like a huge amount of clicks still coming through Google, increasing year on year. So that's why you still have to do SEO. So as I mentioned before, like I've built and monetized websites with SEO for all these different types of niches. And my approach has always been the same, is to basically look at what Google's ranking and then figure out how you stack up against these 5 critical factors that we're going to be talking about. So let's just jump in right here. The ranking factors for 2021, right? What are they? Are there 2,000 ranking factors? I don't think so. I don't want to hear that. That's like too much, right? Like, what do you even deal with that? You got 2,000 ranking factors. How do you optimize for that? And I actually really like this tool And we use this tool at Orbit Local for like really pages that are really stuck in Google. But I mean, you can't start here, right? That's like way too much. What about, 200? There's a lot of things here you can do. But again, like how do you even tackle these 200 factors when it comes down to like ranking your site in Google? So this is what I look at, right? I look at these 5 factors: website quality, website relevancy, page relevancy, page strength, and website strength. Now, the first 3 are directly controllable. That means that you could get off this webinar and take action and have an immediate impact on those 3 main ranking factors. The other 2, you can't really do right now. Like that's going to require getting links, which is a whole other topic that we're covering today. So before we like really get into how to optimize for these ranking factors, it's important to know, and I know this is like a SEO basics course, so we have to kind of talk about this a little bit, how Google works. So, Google is basically a bot. They spider through the different pages on the web through links, sitemaps, and things like that. Then once they get there, they kind of analyze the page content, and they store that content in a database. And meanwhile, on the flip side, you have someone who is searching, and what Google's going to do is they're going to go back using their algorithms and then fetch that data that's been stored in the index, right? So that's essentially how it works. So when we talk about how to do SEO this year, next year, last year, it's pretty much going towards this alignment where you have search intent, what someone is sitting down there on the computer searching for, SERP intent. Now that's the type of content Google thinks people want to see. And we'll get into that. And then we have your 5 factors on your website. And that's basically your page, the content you want to rank. And so we're going to take a look at this here with a few examples. So the first example I want to go over is just best kids bike. Like someone searches for this, Google's going to interpret, that search intent. Like what does this person want? They're going to go back, evaluate, and rank their content according to this. Now let's say they rank these 2 pages somewhere, right? One page on the left, it has, it mentions words like Huffy, kids, treks, safe. And the other one is more like it's my product page, right? Mine is the best bike. I get this all the time. It's like, hey, I have this e-commerce site. I want to rank #1 for best, kids bike. Well, it doesn't quite work like that. Google's smart enough to realize that your page does not mention other brands or other topics that other websites mention when talking about this topic, right? So when you get there, the person searching for that, Google thinks wants a list of other brands, and then you show them this your brand page with your products only. People are going to hit back because they want different options, and that's what Google thinks they want. And so when you look at this other page has those words. It also has links from other bike sites and blogs. So Google's going to look at these 2 content pieces and look at how people interact with the content on the site. And then it's going to decide, hey, I'm going to bump this page higher next time. And the next time I'm going to bump this page lower. So that's essentially how, when you get down to here, like how this actually works, that's kind of what happens there. All right, so now we'll actually look at the SERP finally. So you see this is very, busy looking SERP. There's listicles ranking, there's buyer's guides. And when you look at, one thing I noticed that's really interesting with this SERP is that Google is only showing products as ads. Like there's literally no product pages or e-commerce pages, category pages. None of that stuff is ranking. It's either these listicles, buyer's guides, or Google product ads. And I think that's really interesting because Google knows that people want to look at bikes for this search, but then they don't show individual in the e-commerce website product pages, which I think is kind of, how Google likes to do things. But, basically the takeaway here is that SEO is going to work well when all 3 of those things are aligned. That's why I think before we start getting into the 5 factors of ranking, you really have to understand the search intent and the SERP intent. That should be like the framework of how you approach SEO. And basically what I'm telling you here is you're never going to rank that product page because that's not what Google thinks people want to see. You have to create some sort of listicle or buyer's guide and then rank that. So that topic brings up, correlation SEO. Like what this is basically just looking at, the 5 ranking factors blown out into as many as like 2,000 here in this core SEO tool. So that's kind of like what this is looking at. There's tools here that can help you figure out the correlation between individual ranking factors and the search results on a keyword level basis. So I think this is the kind of stuff you have to look at when you're looking at pages that are stuck in SEO and figuring out like what does Google actually prefer with this particular search, and you have to kind of take that. But this is like not where you start, right? Where you start is really the basics, and I want to kind of get into that right now. So this is the first factor. So now we're getting to the first real factor here, and that's website quality. So what is website quality? So there's a lot of text here, but basically what you need to know is that Google is going to be, as I said, they're crawling those pages, they're figuring out what's out there on the web, and then they're processing that information. So when you have low quality pages with, poor content, lack of web mentions, if your website's not being mentioned across the web, if your content is hard to index, if you have website errors, Google's going to start trusting that less and less over time. So those are all the things you have to consider when you're talking about website quality. And I like to look at it like this way, like let's really make it simple here. Google is a robot, right? They have that robot, it's crawling, it's looking at pages, and someone types in to Google, plumbers in Chicago. Google's going to look at all these web pages and say, okay, well, this page here has minimal technical errors. There's no 404 errors on the site throughout. There's no redirect chains. There's no lorem ipsum content. There's no errors in the sitemap. This is a nice, fast-loading site. And then the other one here, it's got all those problems. Google's going to say, I'm going to go to the other one because I trust that website more than I trust this one with a bunch of website quality issues. And so you have to start addressing your website quality and start looking at all your pages to really figure out what Google may see when they start looking at your site. So let's talk about how do we improve your website quality. So the first thing is to get a comprehensive, complete inventory of all your pages. Classify those pages. Are they sales pages? Are they product pages? Are they site info pages? Are they blog pages? Are they about author pages? Whatever those are, just start classifying them, and then you can divide your site into chunks and start really analyzing what you got. Sometimes you'll have a website builder in the past, or maybe you switch from Wix to WordPress, or maybe you have like a different developer, you change design in midstreams of your project. You got to really get a comprehensive crawl of your website, because those pages might be lurking there and you don't even know. Once you really crawl a whole website, you really have to figure out what you got. I've seen websites with 5 home pages that are indexed, stuff like that. You have to get that inventory, and then you got to figure out what to do. I start by figuring out what can I no index, what can I delete. If I have WordPress tag pages, those rarely rank in Google. You never really, in most cases, I'll say 99% of cases, you don't need those pages in WordPress in Google. You don't need your custom post types. I've seen, thousands of, portfolio entries that got just plug and went crazy and just created all these pages. And then that results in a bunch of thin content pages, and Google's looking at your site as a whole and saying you got 10,000 page of gibberish. It's really going to lower your website quality. So I like to just no index all those things. And then I like to update my sitemap with indexable pages only. Make sure that only the pages you want for SEO are in there, because that matters a lot, because a lot of times I come across sites and they have all the pages that I just mentioned above in their sitemap, and it just really dilutes the quality of their website to the search engine. So the other things you have to do right now as well is improve website speed. We're going to talk about that here in a second. Just overall, these actions will help improve your crawling and indexation. And if you are in your money or your life niche there, that YMYL niche, if you are in that, like if you're selling insurance, or if you're selling finance, or if you have health products or anything like that, your website is going to have stricter guidelines when Google is looking at the website quality. So when you're looking at speed, the overall website quality, this is going to be a huge ranking factor over the summer. Google's going to start using these vitals here to determine if your website quality is up to par or not. So there's going to be some sort of ranking boost, I believe, according to Google and John Mueller, and the link is there. So they are expecting to roll this algorithm out here in summertime, and you got to make sure your website is up to snuff. And we have built this tool where you can crawl your website and find all these pages and what the speed is according to these core vitals that Google's pushing out, and determine what action you need to take, if any. Again, one of the tools I recommend when you're talking about improving website quality is a Screaming Frog. They have a free version where you can crawl 500 URLs for free. just make sure that you do plug in the GA and Google Search Console integration so that you can pull data from those resources. Also, when you're looking at the spreadsheet of all the URLs, you'll have an idea of which pages are receiving traffic and impressions in search, and that will help you determine which pages are quality versus the ones that are not. Also, like if you're on WordPress, I definitely recommend that you index those category pages or those special pages that we talked about, events, all those things. If there is no target keyword that you're trying to rank for that people are specifically searching for, you don't need that page indexed. And sometimes it's just easier to index all these versus figuring out what they're doing. So I usually just will set this up on all the sites that we work on. So I'll leave the screenshot up and I'll have this slide for you to look at later on. And again, no SEO is going to help you if you're a web guy, tick this box here while he was building it. Like I've got sites where they've come in and they had, this disallow in their robots and nobody, even knew about it. And we're like, my SEO is not good. I'm like, well, it's because you've been blocking your robots for years. And it's just like, oh, okay. So you got to make sure that this indexing topic is really, really important. So you don't want to neglect how you want to set up your SEO settings so to maximize your website quality. So when you talk about maximizing website quality, I mentioned if you are in like the money niches, your money or your life niches, so like health, finance, those type of niches, this is really going to matter to you more. So basically this looks at who is creating the website, who is creating the content on that website. Is that person trustworthy? Do they have credibility in that topic? Google's specifically looking at these things on a per person basis. And I think that's kind of crazy because when I was doing SEO back in the day, the whole rage, I don't even remember where the dates were, but the whole rage was like Google authorship and all that stuff. And even though they don't use that as a ranking factor anymore, and maybe they claim that they never even did, but Google's looking at these things, right? They know who people are and they know entities and they recognize these things. And so, just having that expertise and having that person tied back, I think Google is smart enough to tell. Some other things you have to look at when you're talking about EAT is, you have to look at your off and on page signal. So it's obviously the person who we talked about, who's creating that content is important. But when you get into more of the technical stuff, there are some technical things you can look at here. So this screenshot is from a tool called Page Optimizer Pro. And what it does is it looks at some of these EAT signals. I don't necessarily have to have a tool to do this analysis. You can look to see like some of these potentially signals that send trust to Google would be like having a privacy policy, in terms of service page, having a customer service page, having links to return policy. So if you're looking at the way this tool works is if you type in a keyword, let's say we're looking at, best, organic makeup or something like that, and what those results look like. So this will tell you here, okay, so the average of page one, they have, 21 internal links. You don't have that many. And then it'll tell you how many internal links you have without 404. So again, like those broken links and not having enough content on your website, it's a loss of trust with Google. The other thing this tool does, it'll tell you how many out of the 10 sites on page one have these features. So if you look at this, you see every single site has a shopping return policy in your e-commerce site, and you don't have a return policy on there. Those things will start to jump out at you. You see this site doesn't have an email address where 6 out of the 10 do. They don't have a phone number when 3 of them do. So these are all things you have to consider and how you can start boosting the trust of your website by looking at some of these footprints that Google can detect, right? Because again, you have to realize that Google is a robot. So how can you leave, footprints or breadcrumbs for these robots so that they could understand that, yes, I do have these things. So it can be as simple as having, a cookie policy text in your footer, but then actually having that footer hypertext linked to a page, because Google's going to probably know, hey, that's usually a good signal when I crawl across websites that they have this there, and that usually ends up being a cookie policy. So Google looks at those things. All right, so now I want to get into website relevancy. So we talked about the qualities being one of the main factors, and I like to address that factor first because, like I said, if you have a block robots from crawling your website, nothing else will matter when you start doing SEO. So now that we got that stuff out of the way, now it's time to look at how relevant is your website for the topic that you're doing. So here's like a simple explanation here. Let's say someone is searching for a roofing repair, and Google's going to look at a website with 40 pages about roofing, and Google's going to look at another website with 3 pages about roofing. Like which one do you think a robot would choose? Like a robot would definitely choose the website that has more content about this. And then you could use internal linking here and keyword targeting to make sure that Google's ranking the right pages. But again, this is all about having website relevancy. So here's another example. Let's say you have an e-commerce site and you have a category of products, and let's say it's like mirrors. And then on that category page, you only have 4 products versus another category page that has 12 products. Google can look at this and decide that this page A has more options than page B. So Google will look at this page and give it a boost when it's ranking. So that's one of the signals you look at when you're looking at specific searches, is perhaps for e-commerce example, you would look at how many keywords are linked and anchors regarding your category. That's a good signal that page has a lot of results that are about this. So Google likes those things. So when you're talking about website relevancy, how can you check yours? One of the easiest ways to check this is to just do a site search for your keyword. So you see on the left there is my website, and I have a pretty small website. When you look at my website compared to Shopify, I think I may have about 200 pages on my website or so. I don't think I have that many more. If it is, I need to do a website quality audit because I shouldn't have that many. But when you look at Shopify here for this keyword, they have 100,000 results, right? And so I'll pick and choose my battles here with Shopify, but it just goes to show you have to kind of start looking at things the way that robots do, because these are the ranking factors that are important in 2021. So how do you improve your website relevance? So I would say that you focus on topics, not keywords, because you could have one page that ranks for hundreds of keywords. So I would really try to focus on the topics really more than the specific keywords. You also really have to make sure that you fully understand that concept I explained earlier, which is SERP and user intent and your content overlap. We have to have alignment between those 3 areas for each particular search. And the way you do that is that you create content for each stage of the funnel. So I recommend that you focus on lower competition keywords when you're starting out. And the way you can figure that out is just look at your domain authority or your domain rating and see what are similar sites within your DR or DA have, and try to go below that range. And that's how you can start picking up some low competition keywords. You can also use keyword research tools, but they're quite honestly none of them are great. So you kind of have to eyeball it every time. And the way once you figure out those keywords, you have to start figuring out, how do I group those keywords back into specific pages, and how do you marry those keywords together? And we'll talk about some of that. And I also want to mention here that when you are talking about your website, do try to create some content that has shareable and linkable topics. And again, we're not going to get too much into link building in this training, but I want to go over that while you're putting together your content. Do you think about how are you going to get links? So as I mentioned before, one of the ways you can build out these silos is to create a buyer's journey. And it's actually not that hard. All you would do is just figure out what your main keyword is, and then use some search modifiers to capture people through different phases of the funnel. Now, for different phases of the funnel, there's going to be different types of content that you can create. Like, for example, at the top of the funnel, you're going to have those informational searches like how to, or what is, or what are some stats. And you can produce some guides, some articles, infographics. But then you can go down to the next step, and then you can start producing maybe some soft selling articles. You can still do a blog post, but you could do some soft selling there. You get down into the middle, you can start doing buyer's guides, and then so on and so forth till you get to the bottom. So I have kind of here a cheat sheet that we use in-house to help figure out the modifiers. So when you have informational content, you'll see the search modifiers there. And these are the types of content you can produce that will match the searcher intent, match that SERP intent. This is the type of content you can produce. So here's how that looks. So if you type in to keyword tool, you can use SEMrush, you can use Ahrefs. Those are the two that we use. You can just put your main keyword here, and then you can put these modifiers. And again, these modifiers are right here. I just put on here and put any. And then you'll get some keywords here that are definitely closely related to that. And these keywords will map along the buying cycle. So these are, we're basically finding all the top funnel keywords by using these modifiers, because these top funnel keywords will usually have less polluted SERPs with all those features. So I try to go for the top funnel first. Those are usually going to be the higher volume keywords. And then you could drill into these higher volume keywords that are at the top of the funnel by looking at some of the keyword difficulty and lowering this number, and then trying to find some that can potentially be easy to rank for. So again, like a lot of people like using Keyword Planner for this. I don't do it. You see, we did the same exact search on here where you use the free tool and you put roofing in here and you put how and some of these other modifiers, and it doesn't even give you anything. Where here you did this and you get a bucket load of keywords that are great. So I do recommend that if you have any sort of budget for SEO, I know some of the people on here are small business owners, some of them are other marketing agencies, but it's definitely worth getting yourself a paid tool to help with keyword research. So SEMrush, Ahrefs are both pretty solid at that. As we go on to looking at different types of content and how you can produce content that maps to what people are searching for. So if someone's using these modifiers into Google, they're typing in your main keyword plus these other words. These are the types of content you can usually create. And I'm not going to go through all these. I'll just have the cheat sheet here, but just know that there's different types of content to produce for these modifiers that we're typing in. Same thing with e-commerce sites. So the last example we looked at, like a service page, these keywords would be representative of the buying cycle for those, like towards the bottom. Someone's looking for cost or service or company, they're near the bottom of that buying cycle. So you need to produce these type of pages. Now, if it's an e-commerce site, it's going to be different. It's going to be looking at product pages. You're going to want to target these modifiers: price, buy, shop online, use, replacement. These are great modifiers to put into these tools to help spit out some of the keywords along the buyer's journey. So here's another example here. You pop those keywords in, those modifiers that we've been looking at, along with your main keyword. Let's say you're selling African black soap. You pop in these modifiers, and these are all great keywords to potentially target to help build that website relevance, right? We're still talking about that second factor, is how do I build this up? So I would start by making this list along the customer journey and scooping up those keywords. Now, you get this list of keywords. Now what do? Like, this was always the problem that when you start doing SEO at scale, this is a really complex problem, really. Do I need 848 pages? So then you really have to start looking at this and figuring out how do you group this together. I used to just pick keywords that I know that were specific topics. Like here you can see African black soap and how to use African black soap. Those are definitely two different topics, and I would only select those two and know that I'm creating those pages. And I would try on purpose not to select too many of these, because I would try to, in my brain, group these together. So how to make African black soap. I think I could probably rank those together, maybe not, but definitely some of these look like separate, but then it's we got to figure that out, right? You got to figure this out while you're looking at it, and that takes a long time. So what I do now is I just grab all these keywords and I use keyword clustering. So how does this work? You make your keyword list just like we've been doing. And then what this tool will do is it will basically compare all of them. And there's different tools that do this. This is Cluster AI. But basically what it will do is it will search each keyword that you put in, and it will look at the results and see if there's 3 common results or higher for a specific group of keywords. It will group those keywords together. So basically, if 3 pages that are similar page rank for this, that also rank for this, it would say you only need 1 page to rank for both of these. So this was a way to take a list of 800 keywords down to a few pages. I use a tool called Keyword Cupid to do this. So here's like another example of how this works. What this tool does is it'll take all the keywords that you want, and then we'll group them together into silos. So it talks about your main content cluster. It'll group them all up. So here's a cluster of pages that you can produce together that will help improve your website relevancy in like a quick spurt. So you look at the individual silo, right? And then you look at what are the pages that are within that silo. So here we have, you can see these are very closely related. It's about a hub for Terminal Square, setting up Square Terminal, but the intent is slightly different based on how those keywords are grouped, which is based on what content's ranking for that. So if there's not a lot of pages that are ranking for both of these individual page topics, the tool will not recommend those to be grouped together. So you have a silo here, and you have 4 pages within that silo, and then you have 25 total keywords. So these are the keywords you could try to rank for on a specific page. So I can try to rank all these keywords on that page, but on this page, this keyword, I need a separate page. So then you can start to figure out exactly how many pages you need, and then you can kind of prioritize that based on looking at some of the data that you have available to you when analyzing keywords. The way I like to approach it again is to build out silos. So here's like an example. Let's say you have an existing page that's about hail damage for roof repair, right? It's a service page. You have that. If you really want to rank that page, you need to start building out the supporting pages around that. And you could use tools like keyword clustering tools to figure out that these are all different pages because the content that Google ranks is different from these pages to the next. So that's how you know how many pages you could build out to build out your content silo. So like here you see these are quite similar, but it's different enough that you require a specific page. So this is how you establish that topical authority and website relevance with Google. So now I want to talk a little bit about page relevancy. So page relevancy is all about looking at your page and making sure that you have the right words on there. So users and search engines expect to see certain phrases on your website. If it's not there, it sends a signal to Google and users that the page isn't the best result. So let's say for this keyword here, renter's insurance, people and Google will expect to see some of these terms on the page because the higher ranking pages are also including these terms. And you can see using these statistical tools for SEO, how you should start to optimize your page for relevancy. All right, so the way Google is looking at your page relevancy is rapidly changing. That's what's always changing. What was keyword cannibalism in 2015 is now like a smart styling strategy. I would have never had said, hey, build out pages like this in 2015. I would have told you to make one mega page and try to rank all these keywords, but that's changing with Google BERT. And you see this is an example that Google themselves have shown when they explained how this algorithm has been updated. You can basically see that the search is much more specific. The results are more specific to the specific search. And what you want to look at here is just really analyzing what does this mean. So when you look at this specific page that Google has shown, this cron.com website, you can start to see that this mega page strategy stopped working. You can see that they lost rankings for different intent keywords. So you see keywords like salary, is it a good career? It used to rank all those keywords on this one page. And if you even look at this one here, are they in high demand, right? It was #1, and now it's like not even in the top 100. And when you look at the SERP now, you'll see like pages that are only this topic specifically are the only ones that are ranking for this now. So how do you improve your page relevancy? So you can create highly focused metadata, and we'll talk about that here in a second. You can start including those NLP and LSI terms in your content, and I'll explain that a little bit more. The other thing you want to start thinking about is if you have an established site, is maybe you need to go back and regroup some of those other keywords that you once had, like in here. I would go back now and I'll say, let's split these up into different pages because that's what Google is showing now. You may need to go back and look at those other ones and create new pages for each keyword that was lost. Now, again, the tactics don't really change. I'm sorry, the tactics do change. Like the tools change, what the way you approach it, though, will never change. And the way you always approach it is to look and see what Google is ranking and how they are ranking them. So when we start talking about optimizing your metadata, this is one of the first most important things, really, is the big three. I look at your title tag, your meta description, your URL. You know what these things are, so I'm not going to go too much into detail. But if you can include some symbols, numbers, or power words in that title tag, you can try to make your listing stand out. You also need to try to include secondary keywords and your main target keyword in your meta description, and also try to make some sort of call of action or something to make it clickable. I also recommend that you have your website URL, your target keyword in your website URL. So, if that's not a huge deal, like if you don't have it and your page is not ranking, you may want to go ahead and redirect it. But if you have some rankings already, I would just leave it alone. But the key takeaway here is that you want your SERP, your SERP listing here, this three things, you want them to be enticing, but more importantly, you want it to match the searcher intent. So if someone searching for this, if you look at what Google is ranking all listicles. So obviously I'll produce a listicle and I'll match that intent. I'm not going to produce like a how-to guide for something where Google's just showing listicles. You also want to look at your key signal areas. We've already talked about your title tag, your page title. You also need to think about your body content, the URL, all those things we just mentioned. You have to think about, your headings on the page, the hypertext you're using when you have clickable links. You want to talk about your bold, your italicize. Those things are important to add in the right amount of times. And I know this really seems like old school SEO, but these are all things that you have to look at because they are ranking factors. The other thing you want to look at here is the content. Now, we talked a little bit about the BERT algorithm. And so basically what that means is they're getting smarter about how they understand context. And they're getting really accurate about this. So the term here is latent semantic indexing, NLP, whatever you want to call it here. It's basically just how search engines understand the relationship between words based upon the context, where they display on a page and the other words around them. So the way these tools work is they analyze the top 20 or 100 results depending on the tool, and then they'll run through those phrases that they find through additional databases to find related terms. Some of them use Watson database, some of them use the Google NLP database, some of them have their own databases. So they try to find additional terms that are related, and then they try to make a correlation between the presence of those words and their rankings. And so after they do that, the tool will give you a list of terms that you should use and how often. So these are some good tools that I recommend for doing content analysis. SERP for SEO is a good one, ClearScope and UseTopic. These are all good tools for helping you do that content analysis. Now, some of the other ranking factors here, we talked about website relevancy, website quality, and page relevancy. We didn't talk too much about page strength or website strength because those aren't directly controllable. You can't act on those today, and that requires a whole different slew of one-on-one type training. But I do want to talk about it a little bit here. So essentially, what that is basically links to your page and links to your website. One of the things I do want to mention here is that Google is getting really smart at determining your authority. They look at links to your homepage, but they also look at how many people are searching for your brand, right? If someone is searching for like an Apple iPhone, they know that that brand is really important when people start searching for your brand plus the product category or plus that service you offer. That's sending Google a really strong signal that your website is an authority on that topic. So that is how you do it for that. And that's a whole different level of marketing that you're talking about. PR, you're talking about branding. To get people really searching for your brand is really when you get to the holy grail of SEO. Now, the reason why I'm talking about this at the end here is because none of that stuff is going to help you if you don't have those other top three factors under control. Like links is not the magic bullet that it used to be. You have to really get your website quality and relevance up to standard. So I just want to take a break here and just kind of see if anyone has any questions.
Hi, Darren. Did you want to do the questions that have come in?
Yeah, I'll take some questions now. So what's your take on organic search engine optimization marketing? I mean, I think my take here is that it's still important and it still matters a lot. As someone who's built entire businesses relying on mostly organic search engine traffic, I would tell you that it's really a priority. And my overall take is that it has to be central to your online brand marketing. So I wasn't sure about if that answers the questions or not. I think so.
Yeah, I think that did. Early in the presentation, you mentioned a site speed tool, and Martin wanted to know what the name of that tool is.
It's a tool we're actually working on right now. It's still in beta. We use it internally for our own websites, our own client websites. We should be launching it within the next 2 weeks or so. And so we'll put that out there. And the tool, what it'll do, it'll scan your website and it will tell you all your core vital scores. It will also tell you your overall page experience score that Google has out. So you can really start to identify specific pages that really need a boost.
Okay, great. Diksha asked, how can we rank our website if I don't add the sitemap, robots.txt, analytics, and meta tags?
I mean, I would say it's possible. It's possible to have it. If I would just make sure that your website is indexable, make sure you don't have those things that tell you not to index it. I would say it is important, but not critical. Like if you have a good content on your website and you're getting links to your website, I think Google doesn't necessarily need those things. But I would make sure that you're not just putting out a bunch of pages that are low quality. But I do think that you can rank a website without those things, but those things certainly help.
Okay, great. Sean asked, Darren, assuming authority is important.
Here is information from Rank Ranger.
That's interesting. I don't know what that is.
My Google phone was like listening to us talking and it just started talking back.
Oh, okay. Says, Sean asked, assuming authority is important, is this just about broken links and privacy policies, or does it go beyond this to who you are and your personal authority in your niche or industry?
So if you're talking about like your money or your life niche, I definitely think it does go back to who the main creator of the content is. And Google says that in their guidelines, that they're looking at who is creating this main content. So I do think if you're like insurance, or if you're doing like finance, like having that background behind yourself, having a LinkedIn profile, having all those things, I do think those things help. I think having your personal name mentioned across other websites, I think those things will help. So hopefully that answers that question.
Okay, great. He also asked, how important are external links to your website? What kinds of external links can hurt or help your website? And what can be done to mitigate harm and maximize benefits?
I mean, that's a really great question. I think when you're looking at external links, you really have to think about the user experience, and you have to think about the user experience and what you want that person to have. Like on a service page or like a money page, I would try to avoid having external links, just because once you get them there, you want them to, take action and either call you or contact you or fill out your form or whatever. So I would avoid those. Now it may make sense, like if you want to have like social proof that maybe an authority agrees with you on this topic, maybe you have testimonials or something like that. Maybe you can evaluate if it makes sense in that situation to have those external links. Now, when you're talking about like different types of content, I think you have to look at, again, what's going to make a good user experience for that content. If you have like an informational article, you're going to want to have like sources to back up what you're saying. So having external links would be natural there. Now, when it comes to like specific site quality that you link to, I'm really, really picky on the sites that I manage, what sites we link to. I try to link For my medical website, I try to link to plenty of .edus and .govs. If it's my marketing website, I try to link to other marketing websites. And I don't link to sites that are about like a bunch of different topics. I avoid linking to sites like that. I avoid linking to sites that don't have good rankings. And there's times when sites don't have good traffic, but it's a good site. If the site is trustworthy, then I'll link to it if it adds value. But I generally try to avoid sites that are just set up for link building schemes.
No, that sounds good. All right, so what's the biggest difference between SEO for a local versus an online business?
I mean, I think the biggest difference is going to be, the keywords that you target, like which modifiers you use to create the content will be a big difference. I think when it comes to like a local SEO, like you can go a really long way with just Google My Business. Getting that map rankings more times than not is going to help you get leads versus some organic SEO stuff. So I would say that's the biggest difference, is you really want to focus on the map results, and you really want to focus on just how you can build up your citations and those types of things. Now, when you're talking about an online business, it's a totally different game, because you're competing nationally here. You're not just competing at a local level. So the level of competition is much greater, and it requires much greater resources to market those online businesses. So that to me is the two biggest differences.
Okay, great. I'm actually typing short answers in, so we'll have a record of it. Martin says, thanks for the answer, and he's looking forward to your tool. I'll make sure I let you know, Martin, when I get it. Ruben asks, how much do image titles and alt tags matter to on-page SEO?
I would tell you that it's best practice, right? I always start with the best practice. It's going to be best practice to add those image titles and alt tags. You want to describe what the image is about. That's just a best practice. Now, when you start talking about how much does it matter, I really think that depends on what the search is. Like, let's say your search is how to make something, right? Someone's searching for how to make something. You're probably going to want to have a lot of images on that page versus, what is something. So I think Google's going to know that for how to, people want to see a lot of images. And we know that Google is looking at images. They just updated recently about affiliate websites, and they specifically are going for websites that write like product reviews. And Google's looking for original product photos on that. So I definitely think it's important, but when you want to figure out how important it is, then you start using correlational tools to figure it out.
Okay, super. Anita asks, if you had to pick one or two things to optimize existing blog articles, what are the most likely things to focus on? Would it be adding more headers and header tags, more content, more keywords?
I think the first thing I would focus on would be the target keywords. You really want to confirm that you're targeting the right keywords for that search. And I see a lot of mistakes with that. If you have a service page that you're targeting, make sure that that's really clear and that you have a well-defined grouping. So when I target keywords, I like to target them in groups. So I'll have a primary keyword and then a secondary keyword. Know what those secondary keywords are, and then optimize around that. But after you figure out what those keywords are, the first thing I would do is focus on that metadata and make sure that metadata includes those keywords, but also that it includes some sort of strong call to action to make someone click on it. And then next, I would look at the individual content.
Great. Okay. All right. So Idris asked, talk a little about backlinks. How relevant are they still?
I think backlinks have become much harder to get naturally. I think that they don't matter as much as they used to. I think they still matter quite a bit though. And when you start looking at more difficult national level SEO, when you're competing against guys or gals who are really savvy at their SEO, you're really going to want to amp up those links, because that's where, when all things are equal, that's what separates the wheat from the chaff. Like if you have a good quality website, you have good content, and then your competitor does as well, but then they also have, 5 times the links as your website, that's when it becomes hugely relevant. But if you're competing against other local websites who don't quite get it, you don't really need that many links. So hopefully that answers the question.
All right. She also asked, are subdomains treated the same when it comes to SEO? Do you advise that one have a unique domain?
I think it depends on the case. If your subdomains aren't going to be used for SEO, it makes it really simple. Like if you have like support docs or stuff like that, put those on the subdomain. In general, the preference is, for me, is always going to be, if we're splitting hairs, right? And this is really one of those questions that's really splitting hairs. I would say keep it all on the same domain, but it may not make sense all the time. Like for example, the tool that we're releasing coming in a few weeks, the speed tool, it's not going to be something that we can stick on our subdomain or a subpage on Orbit Local, because we're running WordPress, so it's going to have to be on a subdomain. So it really depends on the technical side as well. I would try, if I could, I would stick that thing on as a subfolder, but I can't, so I'm putting it as a subdomain.
Okay. Diksha asked, what about the ranking if I don't add meta descriptions in my website?
I think the meta descriptions, sometimes Google doesn't even use them, right? So I know a lot of people will say, hey, should I even write these things, because Google's going to rewrite what I put in there anyways. And again, this comes back to just covering your bases with best practices. Like, to me, this is just like a best practice. There are some tricks you can do to get Google to recognize your meta description, such as putting your meta description on the page itself. A lot of the tricks I like to do is whatever I write for that meta description, I use as an intro for my article, and that will help kind of strengthen the keywords that I'm targeting. But so I always recommend that. But again, if you're really wanting to split hairs, that's when you start looking at correlational SEO and seeing how much of that is a ranking factor for the specific search that you do.
Okay. I'm not sure I understand the next question. Diksha asked, can non-searchable keywords be ranked?
I don't really know how to answer that question either.
Yeah, I don't know what a non-searchable keyword is.
Maybe the person means like keywords that no one else has searched for before, maybe. And I think
okay, so is it still true that Google only shows a number if there's at least 10 searches in a month? So any keyword that gets searched less than 10 a month won't show up in reports, or didn't used to?
Yeah, I mean, I don't usually use Google for a source of keywords anyways, but yeah, I don't know quite the question, but I do know that 15% of searches each day are totally new. Google's never seen those searches, so you have to kind of sometimes wing it with keywords in a way where, like, if you think someone will be searching for something and it makes sense that they would be searching for something, but then no database shows anything, I would still like target that keyword if it made sense for your business, as long as you're also targeting a keyword where people search for.
All right, so Sean said, thank you for all the great answers. Martin asks, is it good for users? It is good for users have challenges with their vision and eyes also. I'm not
That's
sure
not
what
something
Martin,
that I'm an expert in. I know there's some basic stuff that websites should do for accessibility. And there's some website readers that will read image, alt text and stuff like that. That's why you put it in there. But I'm not really an expert about this topic.
right. Martin, I do have some answers for you on that. I will send them to you separately. I'll send them to you on Skype. Martin asks, regarding the description of images, alt text information. Okay, so alt text is officially so that people who can't see or have images turned off can know what that image is, but it's also used by SEO, and I'll let Darren address the used by SEO part, because that, I wish that was separate, honestly.
I try to make it as natural as possible. I mean, you should definitely be writing naturally, but if you're writing naturally and describing images naturally, you should be using like your target keywords in there. Like if you're a personal injury lawyer, you should have an image of a personal injury lawyer on there. You may have other keywords like a picture of a car crash, right? You may have all those related terms that you could use naturally in the alt text. So I do recommend that you write those as like sentences versus just like popping a keyword in there, but you don't necessarily have to.
Right. Yeah, that's why I wish it was separate, because it is SEO. It's important for SEO, but you still want it to describe what's in the image. That's basically it. All right, so Martin said thanks, and just said thanks. And yes, the accessibility question I will answer for you, Martin. I have lots of information on that. All right, so that's all the questions for today. Darren, did you have anything else you would like to close with?
Yeah, sure. So let's see, let me share my screen again here. So yeah, so about Orbit Local, so we're a full service digital marketing agency. We do SEO, we do PPC, we do website design, we do e-commerce websites, we do local websites. We also, a big part of our business also comes from white labeling. We do everything in-house. We don't outsource anything. So other agencies do outsource SEO work to us. So if you have an agency that needs that service, we can do it really well. So that's it. So thanks for letting me join today, and appreciate all your questions.
All right, that's great. So I want to invite everyone and remind you that we do have these on the second and fourth Wednesday of every month. They occur at noon Central, 1 Eastern. And you can see the upcoming events in the blog post. So if you go look at this blog post, when we put the replay video and the presentation in it, or any of the previous events, the Google My Business event, and underneath those, there are upcoming events and links, so you can pre-register. So you can register now, and you'll be reminded when it gets close to that time. And so everyone, thanks for coming, and we'll catch you on the next event.
Bye.
Bye.